What's up, y'all? It's me, it's your boy Asmongold, and today we're going to do something that somebody suggested to me the other day, and I thought was actually a really good idea, and that is a Warrior FAQ video. Now, what this is going to be is that we're going to go over what spec you should be, what talents you should use for what fights, and if certain things are viable, stat priorities, everything that you guys have been asking me on social media and everything like that. We're going to go over all of that, and this video might be a little bit longer, but I think that it has to be at least a certain length in order to cover everything that I want to go over. Now, the first thing that people ask me is arms or is fury better? Now, it really depends on the situation. Now, the first thing that people ask me, or not really the first thing, but something that I'm just going to get out of the way right now, is challenge modes. Now, for challenge modes, arms is going to be better than fury, and the reason for that is you spend most of your time doing trash. Now, some people actually ask me, should I switch over to fury for the boss fights? I don't personally think so, just because in challenge modes, you're scaled down to 630, and so even with all crit gear, you're still probably not going to have enough crit to really make Fury worthwhile. I'd like to just stick with arms and then save all my cooldowns for an execute phase and just be able to burn all of them during that time. So for challenge modes, I would go with arms, and for talents, what I would use is depending on how you're playing, if you're doing a lot of AoE, which you probably should be, I would go with either Taste for Blood, actually probably Taste for Blood, like that is my go-to. And also on top of Taste for Blood, I would use Bladestorm, I would use Dragon's Roar, and I would also use Ravager. And those are going to give you your highest DPS output just throughout the dungeon overall. And so that's what you should be using for challenge modes, arms with those glyphs. Or talents. Now for Highmaul, Highmaul is a little bit different. Now for some fights in Highmaul, arms is better, and for some other fights in Highmaul, fury is better. Now I'm just going to go over right now which was better for which fight, and then we're going to go over the specifics. Now, for Kargath, a fury is better. For Butcher, fury is better. For Brackenspore, arms is better. For Tectus, arms is better. For Twin Ogron, arms is better. For Korag, unless you're killing all the ads and you spend a lot of time killing the ads, fury is still going to be better. And for Imperator, it's kind of a split, but it's more of a 60-40 fury arms, and so I would go with fury for Imperator. Now we'll go through each boss, and I'll tell you guys each talents, the talents that I choose, and the talents that all of the top parsing warriors have been using for each different fight, and all the other stuff, including we'll go over the spec also at the same time again. Now for Kargath it depends on how you do this. Usually, almost always, warriors should be going up to the top and killing the ads, just because of the way. Just because chain hurl happens pretty regularly within about a minute interval, and so you're going to be able to maximize the warrior's capabilities by sending him up there. And so what you really want to be using for Kargath is you want to be using Dragon's Roar, you want to be using Bladestorm, and you want to be using Ravager. And again, you should be Fury. Now Kargath is one of the easier fights, and so it's not really too big of a deal. And these are all for Mythic, but it doesn't really matter. Like even whenever I do LFR, like I've done LFR I think twice, but both times I make sure that I'm spec'd and I'm completely ready to do that fight at the maximum potential, just because it doesn't really cost me anything hardly. And so these are these are talent and spec choices that you can use for all the different difficulties. It's just in Mythic, it's when it becomes most important. Now for For Butcher is a straight single target DPS fight, and so what you want to be using is you want to be again Fury, and you want to be using Stormbolt. Now, whenever you're fighting more than one target at pretty much any interval in the fight, you want to be using Dragon's Roar. Whenever it's a straight single target fight and only single target, that's the only time you really want to be using Stormbolt. But other than that, always be using Dragon's Roar. Shockwave doesn't really have any sort of utility in PvE right now, unless you're doing challenge modes and you need a lot of CC or something like that. But other than that, you pretty much never are going to use Shockwave. Other than that, you should also be using Bloodbath, and Bloodbath is going to be your go-to ability for a one-target fight. It just does a little bit more damage than Bladestorm. Now, you can always use Bladestorm, whenever, like in Kargath, you can use Bladestorm at the beginning of the fight, and you can always use it in between Bloodthirst. Now, that's more of like a meta thing, and so just for Butcher, just know that you need to be using Bloodbath. Now, your 100 talent, this is a little bit... there's a bit of a split here, and I actually was using Anger Management very often, but I've been seeing a lot of the top parsing warriors be using Ravager, and I think the reason for that is just because the way the cooldowns line up in a fight, you're probably only going to get 2 Recklessness phases anyway, and so you might as well just, not really try and almost get 3, because almost doesn't really matter. So I would say Ravager, or also, we call it Anger Management. I personally used Anger Management. I died at the end of the fight, but if I didn't die, I probably would have topped out at about 33.8, probably to 34.5, depending on RNG, DPS. And so that's actually a really, really high level parse. It's about, I'd say probably like in the top like 30 or 40, maybe 50 by now. I'm not entirely sure. And so you can still perform very well as with anger management, but I do see all of the top people using Ravager. And so again, it does matter a little bit with placement because obviously Butcher will be charging back and forth. And so that does make Ravager a little bit harder to use. So for somebody who's not really very experienced or doesn't have boss mods, anger management might be the easier choice. But either way, those two are kind of split, but I do believe Ravager will probably give you more DPS since a lot of those people who are, very theory crafting oriented, unlike myself, are using Ravager. Now for Brackenspore, Brackenspore is going to be the first fight in the I guess like the instance. I guess it depends on how you do it, but either way, Brackenspore is going to be the first fight we're talking about here, where you are going to want to use arms. Now arms is going to be best for pretty much all fights that involve fighting more than one target during pretty much the entire duration of the fight. The reason for that is that arms obviously has extremely strong cleave damage with execute because of sweeping strikes. Sweeping strikes is probably one of the most powerful abilities in the game right now. And also, whenever you have more than, I'd say, 2 targets, you could probably spec into Taste for Blood. Now, with Brackenspore, you don't want to spec into Taste for Blood, in my opinion. What I prefer to use is Sudden Death. And so, I would use Sudden Death for Brackenspore, also Dragon's Roar, also Bladestorm, and Ravager. The reason we're going to be using Ravager on Brackenspore is because you have to keep them on the, I said because like 3 times, but you pretty much have to keep them on top of the mushrooms for a lot of the time. And so because of that, they're going to be stacked in the same spot. And so Ravager, you're going to be able to maximize your damage through Ravager. Some people use anger management, but Bladestorm is going to be pretty much your best bet for arms in general, just because you can use Bladestorm right after your Mortal Strike in the Colossus Smash. And you can get 3 or 4 ticks of Bladestorm into while you have the Colossus Smash debuff on your target, and it makes you do a lot of damage. And especially with Brackenspore, because you're going to be able to fight either 2 or more targets if a Mind Fungus or a Spore Shooter appears on top of you. And so make sure that you're aware of that. Let's see, after that, I'm trying to remember if there's anything else. Let's see, oh, yeah, Ravager, okay. Yeah, so we pretty much went over Brackenspore. Just make sure you have Sudden Death. But Taste for Blood is okay. It's okay, but I think that Sudden Death is, for one, easier to use, and also it does seem to be doing more damage. For Tectus, Tectus is like the God mode arms fight, and so if you're Fury on Tectus, you're doing something wrong. You definitely should be arms for Tectus, and also you should be using Taste for Blood on Tectus, as well as Dragon's Roar, Bladestorm, and because the ads are not really stacked up a lot, I prefer to use anger management, but all of the top parses show Ravager, and the reason for that is that the more control you have over the last phase, the better Ravager becomes, because that's where all the ads are out. And so if you have very good control over the last phase and you're not really moving the ads around too much, go with Ravager. But if the ads are running all over the place all the time, you might want to go with anger management. But again, also another thing that has to do with that is that you're probably not going to get 3 recklessness phases during Tectus, and so anger management is not really working to your advantage in that aspect. It will really only be working for you with Dragon's Roar and Bladestorm. And so again, go arms for Tectus. Arms is like one of the amazing fights for Tectus, and or I guess, yeah, whatever. Or Tectus is one of the amazing fights for arms. I confused myself for a second there. Twin Ogron is going to be the last fight in the instance that going arms for is pretty much a requirement if you want to do really good damage. Now for Twin Ogron, it's a 2-target cleave fight, so arms really shines on this. It's probably one of the top, probably 3 or 4 DPS specs on the fight. And what you really want to be using there is, again, since it's only a 2-target fight, it's always 2-target. There are no other targets, no matter what difficulty you're doing. You're going to want to be using Sudden Death, that's what I use, and also be using, Dragon's Roar, and Bladestorm, and Ravager. You want to use Ravager again because they're stacked up and they don't really move around too much. And so again, just make sure that Twins is like, arms is amazing for Twins. It's not quite as good as it is on Tectus, but it's still really, really good. For Korag, you can, as I said before, our guild, the way we do this strat is that we have a thing where we kite around all the ads and we don't actually kill them. And because of that, if you're going a straight single target in a Korag, you want to be using the same talents that you were using for Butcher, but you always want to be using Anger Management for Korag, because Ravager will hit the ads if you're kiting them, and that will bring the ads lower, and then the ads will explode and do damage to the raid, and so that's very bad. So for Korag, if you're doing a single target kite strat, you want to be using Stormbolt, you want to be using Bloodbath and you want to be using Anger Management. If you're damaging the ads and you're spending a lot of time on the ads, Arms is somewhat viable, but I don't really think it is very much. All of the top parses do show Fury, and so Fury, I would say, is going to come out ahead. But if you are killing the ads, you can go wrong and use Bladestorm, and also Ravager becomes very good because you can put the Ravager in the suppression zones, and it just helps out a lot with damage. You don't have to worry about taking extra damage. Now, as I said before, for Imperator, the top parses are going to be Fury, but there are a couple of Arms parses in there, and I would say out of the top 100, it's about 60-40 Fury to Arms, and so I would stick with Fury. And what you want to go with Imperator is you want to definitely have Dragon's Roar, Bladestorm, and this is something that people might not really expect, is you want to have Anger Management also. And the reason for you want to have Anger Management is because you really want to spend enough rage to where you can have your Bladestorm up for each ad that spawns, because each ad that spawns about like 40 to 45 seconds intermittently, and also during the last phases, so you can burn down all of the ads with Bladestorm and all that. And so the Anger Management allows you to cut down the cooldown on Bladestorm just enough to where you have it up for pretty much every single time, and also it allows you to have it up for the ad phases, Recklessness up for the ad phases. And so Anger Management is extremely, there's the synergy between Anger Management and Bladestorm on Imperator Margok is like, amazing. And so you definitely want to have that. Now, people have asked me a lot, they ask me this like pretty much every day, is Furious Strikes better than Sudden Death? No, it's not. It's not better. It's never been better, and it's never going to be better, okay? And the reason for that is that people say, okay, Furious Strikes may sim slightly higher right now, and one thing that people might also not know, because it's not on the tooltip, is that Sudden Death is not on a flat 10% proc rate. It's on a PPM or RPPM, which is real procs per minute. And so the RPPM increases with haste, and so as we get better gear, Sudden Death will become increasingly better than Furious Strikes. And it doesn't even really matter, to be honest, because Sudden Death is already better. Anybody that's using Furious Strikes is probably delusional because they think that they are a robot or something like that. Now, Furious Strikes can outperform Sudden Death if there is like 0 MS and no player error, aka never. So you pretty much always want to be using Sudden Death for all fights as Fury. Another thing is that should you use Unquenchable Thirst? No. No, it's a terrible talent. You'd never want to use it. It's garbage. Even because whenever your gear is so low, your gear is so bad that you're not really enraged all the time, the Sudden Death procs are obviously going to help you do a lot of damage because Execute is like your hardest hitting ability. And on top of that, the Mastery, you're not going to have enough Mastery for being enraged to even make too much of a difference. And also, it's just, I think it sucks. Nobody on any parses that are very high ever uses Unquenchable Thirst. People say it's good for what do you call it, for PvP. It's not. It's not good for PvP. Some people do use Furious Strikes for PvP. I don't really think it's very good. And the reason for that is because PvP is based a lot around doing things that the other player or the other team won't expect. And whenever you like, oh hey, I just procced a 100,000 execute, they can't fucking plan for that. And so that's why I think that Sudden Death is a little bit better for PvP. But I've also been seeing a lot of top warriors who are Fury be using Furious Strikes. And so I would say Sudden Death. That would be my recommendation. And people ask what are my top stats. So this is going to be for Arms and Fury mostly. Now Mastery on a straight single target fight, Mastery is about even with Multi-Strike as far as I know for Arms. But however, whenever you go beyond one target, because Rend and Whirlwind are not affected by the Arms Mastery, common sense that Multi-Strike becomes better than, what do you call it? I forgot what I was going to say, than Mastery. And so your general stat priority is going to be crit, Multi-Strike, Mastery, I had it written down here, Haste, and Versatility. And at a certain point, I would say, this is like kind of an arbitrary guess, that Mastery will overtake Multi-Strike because the Enrage, the synergy between Mastery and Crit is very good. And Crit is, again, your best stat. You always want to have Crit on your gear. That is your most important stat, regardless of what spec you are. And that's according to Simcrafts. Now, personally, people might say, oh, Multi-Strike could be better, or, whatever else. But that's what the Simcrafts say, and so that's kind of what I go off of, because usually they're right in terms of the stat priorities. Not in terms of everything, but the stat priorities, it usually seems like they're right. So other than that, I do think that Mastery will overtake Multi-Strike somewhere in the next tier. I'm not entirely sure though, so don't quote me on that. Another big question that people ask is, should I be Titan's Grip or should I be Single-Minded Fury? Now, the simple answer for this is that play whatever you have better weapons for. But the longer answer is that on the top 10 or the top like 20-ish, Butcher single target, or sorry, yes, and Butcher is a straight single target fight. There's like no real ads because everybody uses the Ocean strat or the Pool Party strat that I showed in a video a couple days ago. And so it's really just a single target fight. It's about, I'd say 70-30 TG to SMF. And so in my recommendation is play Titan's Grip. And the reason for that, there are a number of reasons for that. For one, it gives you more stats. And one of those stats is stamina. And so it helps you survive certain hits, and where you would have almost died, or where you would have died as Single-Minded Fury, you only almost die as Titan's Grip. And so that makes a really big difference, and it helps. And it is kind of hard to get two really good two-handed weapons, but I do think it's kind of equally hard to get two good one-handed weapons. And so anyway, there are some really high parses with Single-Minded Fury on Butcher, and the fact is, though, that whenever you're doing an AoE fight, if you're not arms and you're just Fury and you just have an AoE, like a phase kind of, like in Kargath, whenever you get thrown up with the chain gang, or you go up to the balcony and you kill all the ads, that's a very small phase. And so whenever like Bladestorm, Whirlwind, Ravager, and what's the last one, Raging Bolt, all of those things do weapon damage. And so whenever you're using a two-handed weapon, that really makes a big boost. And even though you do have the boost to your damage, the flat boost to your damage with Ravager, or sorry, with SMF, that really is only going to affect Dragon's Roar, because Dragon's Roar scales with attack power and not, we call it not weapon damage. And so, long story short, play Titan's Grip. But if you have really, really good weapons, like let's say you coined like a mythic, a butcher weapon, a mythic butcher weapon, if I coined a mythic butcher weapon, well, I don't have a second weapon, but let's say I had a 670 butcher weapon and a 685, I would probably use that over my two 670 two-handed weapons. So that's just a general thing, but probably Titan's Grip will become increasingly better in time because of how much just the stats that you gain from having the bigger weapons. Now, is Gladiator viable? This is a good question, and it's actually, because you guys remember, like back in the beginning expansion, Gladiator was amazing, okay? And it's just been subtly, it hasn't ever really gotten nerfed, but it just got ignored. And so while the other specs became better and better, Gladiator effectively became worse and worse. And so the only time you want to play Gladiator in a raid is if you want to consistently be 14th on the damage meter. But other than that, you probably want to go with Arms or Fury. There are very few Gladiator parses, but in almost all of them, they're pretty fucking bad. Should I ever use a one-handed weapon and a two-handed weapon at the same time? No, 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 never do that. Never, 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 okay? Never, never, never do that. Two one-handed weapons or two two-handed weapons. Never mix them. Like, you get nothing out of it. Even if you have like an amazing weapon in one hand and an amazing one in the other hand, and they're one-handed and two-handed, you're still going to have shitty damage. You never, 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 never do that. Okay, and that's... I don't know why people... I remember there was like something in like Tyrannical Season or something like that where people were doing that for like the extra increase in PvP power, but it's not Tyrannical Season anymore, so don't ever do that. Another people ask is like, why is my damage so low? Just like it's a general question on just like whatever. Now, honestly, there are so many different reasons for that. There's no way that I can ever answer that question for you, honestly. I mean, like, okay, I can go to your armory maybe and say, okay, you've got a leather helmet equipped. You know, that's not really helping you out a lot. Or you've only got one weapon in your Fury, right? But other than like the real obvious shit, like there's not really going to be a way that I'm going to know what exactly is holding you back. Now, I know for myself, like I've been playing a Fury Warrior for, like I've been playing the game for like since 2006. So this is a long time. I've had the same main the whole time. And so I'm very comfortable playing my character. And whenever I go and play my Warlock, which I'm also very, very comfortable with, I'm very good at playing my Warlock. But compared to the Warlocks in my guild who have been playing their Warlock for as long as I've been playing my Warrior, like they just blow me out of the water. Like I don't even really have a chance to compete, even whenever I have the same gear. And so they vastly outperform me in terms of like just those little split-second decisions. They know how to make the right call, and I don't. And so that's what Fury is. There's a lot of those little split-second decisions. You know, should I use both my Blood Surge procs? Should I use my Sudden Death proc? And by the way, you should always be using your Sudden Death proc. But you know, there are times when it's a little bit confusing. And I hope you guys understand that. So there's not really a definite answer of why is your DPS so low. Also, another thing that people like to ask me is a certain item level or a certain DPS good for a certain fight? Now, it really depends, and I'm never going to answer that. I usually always answer that with the answer, there are no magic numbers. And that's really true, because if we have a really, really good enhancement shaman in our guild, and because of that, I don't really get as much DPS time on Tectus than I do on the last phase than that other warriors do whenever they're in a guild that doesn't have that enhancement shaman. And so because of that, my damage is lower than it would be if he wasn't there. And so there are a lot of different, I guess, like confounding variables that really determine how much damage you're going to be doing. Now, as a general rule, I'll just kind of give you guys like a very rough estimate. You should be at least 645 going into normal Highmaul. You should be at least, I'd say like 660 going into heroic, and probably 670, or not even 670. Probably you could do even mythic Highmaul, like the first two bosses, in like 665. And so that's like a very general number. And you know, obviously once you become, I guess, like 3 of 7 and like 4 of 7 mythic, your gear will become increasingly better, and so that really won't be as much of an issue. But just getting into it, I would say 645 is maybe 655, honestly, for heroic, and 665 for mythic. But you want to be getting as close to 670 and beyond that to get into mythic and really performing well. Whenever I first went into mythic, as a comparison, I was 646, and so my gear was garbage, and I still did top damage on Kargath. But again, Kargath is a very, very warrior-friendly fight. So it really depends on the fight. It depends on everything else. So please, guys, no one knows what DPS is good for what fight, because there are infinitely many situations, infinitely many variables. And another thing that's a really big deal, I didn't even really talk about this, is RNG, guys. And Fury is just, you're playing a fucking slot machine, and you pull the handle every 3 to 4 seconds whenever you click Bloodthirst, because if you don't get a crit, you do shit damage. And if you do get a crit and you get sudden death procs, you're going to be doing amazing damage. And it just sucks the way that it is, but because you're really having to rely on about 3 to 4 different procs. You have to rely on Raging Blow procs, you have to rely on Blood Surge procs, that's the free wild strikes, and you also have to rely on sudden death procs, and of course Bloodthirst procking itself, which is kind of 2 different things, because 1, it gives you an enrage that makes you do more damage, and 2, it gives you a charge of Raging Blow. And guys, how fun is this going to be? Whenever we get our 4-piece bonus in Blackrock Foundry, there's going to be a 5th or a 4th, depending on how you want to look at it, another set of RNG. Is it, do you get chain Raging Blow procs whenever your Raging Blow crits? It's going to be amazing. It's going to be so much fun. I'm just kidding. It's not going to be fun. It's going to suck. So hopefully they make some sort of change with that in 6.1. But I wouldn't really expect that too much. Either way, let me make sure that I answered everything. I think that I pretty much did. Now, if you guys have any other questions, because of course there are a lot of different questions that I'm not able to really answer here. This video is pretty long, and I think that really kind of had to be, because I like to talk about things in depth. So it's not just listen to me because I'm right, basically. And so hopefully this kind of gave you guys some insight into why I'm choosing what I'm choosing and where I'm coming from. All of the different talent and spec choices I came up with myself, and also to make sure that I was correct, I went on the Warcraft logs, and I looked at all of the top parses to make sure that I was doing the same things that they were. And so I ended up pretty much always, except for, as I said before, with the Butcher thing, using Anger Management instead of Ravager. So that's like the only real questionable one that I have in here. Either way, guys, that's going to be pretty much it. If you guys have any other questions or whatever else about Warriors, I can pretty much answer them in the comments, and I'd like to kind of like use this as a way to direct people who have, I guess, like more complicated questions to kind of at least like watch this video so they know pretty much what to expect, because I've been getting a lot of the same questions, especially the Arms and Fury thing and Highmaul. And so hopefully I answered that question. And just to reiterate one more time, you should be using Arms for Brackenspore, for Tectus, and for Twin Ogron. And you should be using Arms for, you should be using Fury for Butcher, for Kargath, for, what's the other guy? For Korog, and also probably for Imperator. And so anyway, that's pretty much all I've got. I think I'll just cut it right here. So again, if you have any more questions, feel free to ask. But if not, hopefully this helped you. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe.